Marah Alade was a name that lingered on the lips of everyone at Ekini Girls and Boys High School. Her academic brilliance and effortless grace made her the center of attention, though rarely in a way that brought her joy. Teachers adored her, parents wished for their children to emulate her, and her peers, well, they envied her. Yet, behind the accolades and the perfect facade, Marah carried a secret as vast as the ocean. Her parents, Kunle and Aduni, had spent years praying for a child. Their home was filled with the echoes of unanswered prayers and the silent despair of dashed hopes. Then, in a moment of desperation, they turned to the old ways, traveling to the fabled sacred river of Olode. There, they offered fruit, incense, and whispered pleas to the river goddess. Yemoja, the goddess, had listened. Months later, Aduni conceived, and Marah was born beneath the glow of a crescent moon. But her birth came with a prophecy, uttered in Aduni's dreams by the goddess herself. This child is both a blessing and a challenge. She is of the water and the land, but she must guard her truth, for the world may not embrace what it cannot understand. At first, Marah appeared to be an ordinary baby, albeit exceptionally beautiful and unnaturally calm near water. It wasn't until she turned 5 that her parents began to notice the strange occurrences. A brief drizzle that caught her legs one rainy afternoon revealed shimmering scales, and her feet would sometimes merge into a glistening tail when submerged in water. Kunle and Aduni panicked, shielding her from pools, rivers, and even heavy rainfall. "It's for your own safety," Aduni would insist. Though her eyes betrayed her fear, Marah, confused but obedient, accepted the restrictions. But as she grew older, the truth became harder to hide. By her teenage years, Marah began to suspect there was something extraordinary about herself. One evening, when her parents finally confessed the truth, Marah sat in stunned silence. "You are more than human," Kunle said gravely. "You are a child of the water, born of the goddess's blessing, but the world will not understand. They may fear you." Marah's first reaction was anger, but it quickly melted into resolve. If she couldn't indulge in the simple joys her peers took for granted, swimming, playing in the rain, she would focus on what she could control, her education. She buried herself in her studies, excelling in every subject, and soon became the pride of Ekene High School. But her excellence came at a cost. Among Marah's classmates, admiration quickly turned to resentment. No one resented her more than Tayo, a sharp-tongued and manipulative girl who thrived on controlling others. Tayo's jealousy burned bright, especially when Marah began winning prizes and attention. "Miss Perfect!" Tayo hissed one afternoon, slamming her locker shut. "Think you're better than the rest of us, don't you?" Marah didn't reply. She had learned long ago that silence was her best defense against such provocations, but Tayo wasn't one to be ignored. She began orchestrating a series of humiliating pranks, each one more cruel than the last. Marah's notebooks were defaced with vile words. Her desk was soaked with spilled drinks. Once, Tayo even orchestrated a scheme to lock Marah in the school's changing room for hours, leaving her panicked and humiliated. The cruelty chipped away at Marah's composure. By the time she returned home each day, her perfect mask would crack, revealing the raw pain beneath. One night, as she sat by the small garden pond in their backyard, her legs submerged in the cool water, she let her tears fall unchecked. "Why do they hate me so much?" she whispered, her voice breaking. The water rippled softly around her, catching the light of the moon. Unbeknownst to her, the waters stirred with a hidden energy, carrying her sorrow like a call to the depths. The marine kingdom was listening. Marah returned to school the next day with her heart heavy and her mind clouded by the weight of her secret. She forced a smile, her head held high, even as she walked into the lion's den of whispers, sneers, and glares. The air was thick with animosity, a silent but palpable tension that trailed her every step. Tayo and her clique of bullies, Lara, Bola, and Sai, were already gathered by the lockers, their laughter ringing out like shards of glass. Tayo spotted Marah first and nudged the others. "Look who decided to show up," Tayo drawled, her voice dripping with mockery. "Miss Perfect, ready for another day of gracing us with your holier-than-thou presence." Marah ignored her and continued walking, her steps steady, but her heart pounding in her chest. She knew Tayo wouldn't stop there. "You think you're better than us, don't you?" Tayo continued, her voice rising to ensure the entire hallway could hear. "With your fancy awards and perfect grades, you're not special. Marah, you're just a fraud." Laughter erupted from the group, but Marah didn't falter. She had learned to endure, to stay silent in the face of their cruelty. But today, something deep inside her stirred, something ancient and powerful. That night, as Marah sat alone in her room, her mind replayed the events of the day. Her fingers trembled as she traced the grooves on her award plaques, symbols of her hard work that had brought her nothing but misery. She couldn't sleep. The ache in her chest refused to let her rest, and the whispers of the water in the garden pond outside seemed louder than ever. She found herself drawn to it, her feet moving of their own accord. The night air was cool against her skin as she knelt by the water's edge. The moon hung low in the sky, its reflection rippling in the pond. Marah dipped her hands into the water, the coolness soothing her trembling fingers. "If only they could understand my pain," she whispered, her voice breaking. Tears spilled from her eyes, mixing with the pond's gentle ripples. "If only they could feel it too," the water responded. The once still surface began to swirl, glowing faintly with a light that seemed to emanate from deep below. Marah gasped, pulling her hands back, but the glow only intensified. A soft voice echoed in her mind, calm and commanding. "You have suffered, my child. Let us bear your burden." The next day, Tayo's laughter was noticeably absent. She sat in the back of the classroom, her face pale and her eyes shadowed by sleeplessness. Her friends whispered among themselves, stealing glances at her. "Are you okay?" Lara asked cautiously. "I didn't sleep," Tayo replied, her voice a low rasp. "I had these dreams, nightmares, really. The water, it was everywhere. I was drowning, and there was this voice." She stopped abruptly, shaking her head as if to rid herself of the memory. The others exchanged uneasy glances, but said nothing. By lunchtime, the rest of the group began experiencing similar phenomena. Bola tripped over her own feet on the way to the cafeteria, spilling her tray of food across the floor. Sei, known for her snide comments, found herself choking on her words, her voice inexplicably hoarse and strained. "It's just a coincidence," Lara said, though her tone was unconvincing. "We're all just stressed about exams or something." But the coincidences continued. At night, the group began waking in cold sweats, haunted by nightmares of being pulled into an endless sea. Shadows seemed to dance on the edges of their vision during the day, and strange whispers filled their ears whenever they were alone. By the end of the week, Tayo couldn't take it anymore. She cornered Marah in the school library, her usual arrogance replaced by desperation. "What did you do to us?" Tayo hissed, her voice trembling. Marah looked up from her book, her brow furrowing in confusion. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb," Tayo snapped, her voice rising. Several heads turned in their direction, but Tayo ignored them. The nightmares, the whispers, the shadows. "I know it's you. It has to be you." Marah stared at her, her heart racing. She hadn't meant for this to happen, but deep down, she couldn't deny that the power she had felt at the pond might have something to do with it. "I didn't do anything," she said softly, though her voice lacked conviction. "Liar." Tayo's eyes blazed with fury, but beneath the anger was unmistakable fear. "Whatever this is, make it stop. Do you hear me? Make it stop." Marah said nothing, her silence only fueling Tayo's anger. The bullies stormed out of the library, leaving Marah alone with her thoughts. As she sat there, staring blankly at the pages of her book, a single tear rolled down her cheek. She hadn't asked for this power. She hadn't asked for any of it. But now that it had awakened, there was no turning back. The tension at Akini Girls and Boys High School grew thick enough to cut with a knife. Whispers about Tayo and her clique's strange behavior spread through the school like wildfire. Once untouchable, the group now seemed fractured and vulnerable. Tayo, who had been the queen of cruel pranks, walked the hallways with darting eyes and trembling hands. Lara had taken to avoiding mirrors, claiming she saw shadowy figures in her reflection. Bola flinched at the sound of running water, and Sei, who had once laughed the loudest, now barely spoke above a whisper. But the nights were the worst. Each of the girls was plagued by vivid nightmares, visions of endless oceans, suffocating depths, and the glint of scales just out of reach. In their dreams, they were dragged under by unseen forces, their screams swallowed by the merciless waves. One night, Tayo woke with a start, gasping for air. Her heart pounded in her chest as she looked around her darkened room. For a moment, she thought she was safe. But then she saw it, a faint shimmer of light on the floor, like water reflecting the moon. Her breath hitched. The light grew brighter, and the room began to fill with the sound of rushing water. She scrambled to her feet, backing away toward the door. "Tayo," a voice echoed, low and haunting. She froze. The voice was familiar. Too familiar. It wasn't possible. "Marah," she whispered, her voice shaking. The shimmer of light coalesced into a shape, a figure with a long, glistening tail. Marah stood before her hair flowing like seaweed and her eyes glowing with an eerie light. Her voice was calm, but it carried the weight of the ocean. "You wanted me to stop," Marah said, her tone devoid of emotion, "but you never stopped, Tayo, not until it was too late." Tayo fell to her knees, trembling. "Please," she begged, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't mean it. I'll do anything. Just make it stop." Marah tilted her head, studying the girl who had tormented her for so long. "It's not up to me anymore," she said, her voice a chilling whisper, "The water remembers." With that, the room was engulfed in a flash of blinding light. When Tayo opened her eyes again, she found herself underwater. Her lungs burned as she thrashed against the crushing pressure. Above her, faint rays of moonlight filtered through the waves, but no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't reach the surface. The next morning, Tayo didn't show up for school. Neither did Sei. Lara and Bola whispered nervously in the corner of the classroom, their faces pale and drawn. "You don't think," Lara began, her voice trembling. "It's her," Bola whispered, her hands clutching her desk. "It has to be her." "We need to do something," Lara said, her eyes darting around the room. "We can't just sit here and wait for it to happen to us too." But neither girl could bring themselves to confront Marah. There was something about her now, something untouchable and otherworldly. Even as she sat quietly in the corner of the room, reading her book, she seemed more like a figure out of a dream than a real person. That evening, Marah sat by the pond in her backyard once again. The water shimmered under the moonlight, and she felt its pull stronger than ever. She stared at her reflection, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. The nightmares and torment her bullies were experiencing were not of her making, not entirely. But she couldn't deny the satisfaction she felt, knowing they were finally facing the consequences of their cruelty. "You're losing yourself," a voice said softly. Marah turned sharply to see her mother, Aduni, standing a few feet away. Her face was etched with worry, and her arms were crossed tightly over her chest. "I know you've been hurt," Aduni continued, her voice trembling. "I know what they've done to you, but this This isn't who you are." Marah's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't ask for this, Mama," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't ask for any of it." Aduni stepped closer, kneeling beside her daughter. She placed a gentle hand on Marah's shoulder. "I know, my love, but if you let this power consume you, you'll become the very thing they feared." Marah looked down at the shimmering water. "I don't know how to stop it," she admitted. "You don't have to do this alone," Aduni said. "We'll find a way together. But first, you have to let go of the anger. Forgive them, Marah. It's the only way to free yourself." Marah nodded slowly, her mother's words sinking in. But deep down, she wondered if it was already too late. Marah's nights were restless, haunted not by fear, but by guilt. The torment she had wished upon her bullies had spiraled out of her control, and the whispers of the water grew louder with each passing day. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. "Forgive them, Marah. It's the only way to free yourself." But how could she forgive them? How could she forgive years of humiliation, pain, and isolation? That morning, as the sun struggled to pierce through heavy rain clouds, Aduni and Kunle knew they could wait no longer. They had seen the signs, the unnatural storms, the restless waters, and the shadows that seemed to follow their daughter. They had tried to shield her, but now they realized that the power she carried needed a greater intervention. "We need to see the prophet," Kunle said, with a finality that left no room for argument. Aduni nodded, already gathering her headscarf and Bible. The prophet was a man of quiet strength, his presence commanding respect. Known simply as Prophet Elijah, he lived at the edge of the town, where his small chapel overlooked a river. When the Alade family arrived, he was already waiting for them, standing by the chapel's entrance as if he had foreseen their visit. "Come," he said, his voice deep and resonant. "There is much to discuss." Inside the chapel, the air was thick with the scent of incense. Marah sat stiffly on the wooden bench, avoiding the prophet's piercing gaze. "You are a child of the river," Prophet Elijah said without preamble, his eyes locked onto hers. "The power within you is not evil, but it is dangerous when driven by anger. The spirits that watch over you have grown restless because of the hatred you harbor." Marah's breath caught in her throat. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she whispered. "I just wanted them to stop hurting me." "And they have stopped," the prophet replied. "But at what cost? You must face what has been set into motion, or it will consume not just them, but you as well." Kunle stepped forward, his voice trembling with desperation. "What must we do? Prophet, please. Tell us how to save our daughter." The prophet closed his eyes, as if listening to a voice only he could hear. After a long moment, he spoke. "The river goddess has claimed her rightful place in this matter, but she will yield to a higher authority. There must be forgiveness, from both sides." Marah stiffened. "They'll never forgive me," she said bitterly. "They will," Prophet Elijah assured her, his voice gentle but firm. "Because they, too, need forgiveness for what they've done to you. The chains of hatred bind all involved. Only repentance will set you all free." That evening, the Alade family returned home with a heavy task ahead of them. Aduni called Lara's and Bola's families, arranging for a meeting at their home. Kunle reached out to Tayo's parents, who were desperate for answers about their missing daughter. The following afternoon, their living room was filled with anxious faces. Tayo's parents were the first to speak, their voices sharp with accusation. "Your daughter cursed my child!" Tayo's mother cried. "Where is she? What have you done to her?" "Please," Kunle said, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "We're here to find a solution, not to assign blame." Prophet Elijah, seated in the corner of the room, spoke up. "Your daughter's torment is not Marah's doing alone," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Their own actions opened the door to this. They must seek forgiveness." for themselves and for Marah. Lara and Bola sat pale and silent, their parents glaring at them. "Is this true?" Lara's mother demanded. "Were you bullying her?" Lara burst into tears. "We didn't mean for it to go this far," she sobbed. "We thought it was just harmless fun." "Fun," Aduni snapped, her voice sharp. "You call tormenting my daughter fun." "Enough," Prophet Elijah said, his voice firm. "There is no place for anger here, only repentance." He turned to Marah. "You must forgive them. Child, only then can you reclaim peace." Tears streamed down Marah's face. She looked at Lara and Bola, then at Tayo's distraught parents. Her heart ached with the weight of years of pain, but beneath the anger, she felt a flicker of something else. Relief. "I forgive you," she said, her voice trembling. "For everything." The atmosphere in the room shifted. Prophet Elijah stood, raising his hands as he began to pray. The air grew heavy, charged with a spiritual energy that seemed to hum with life. "In the name of the Almighty," he proclaimed, "I break every chain of hatred, every bond of torment, and every spirit that seeks to divide and destroy." Marah felt the weight on her chest lift, as if a great wave had washed over her. Across the room, Lara and Bola gasped, their faces pale. Later that night, Tayo's parents received a call. Their daughter had been found, disoriented but unharmed, near the riverbank. When she woke, her first words were, "I'm sorry, Marah." The days following the confrontation were a whirlwind of emotion for everyone involved. Tayo had been found, but she was changed. The vibrant, brazen girl, who had once ruled the hallways with intimidation, now spoke with quiet humility. Her parents, once filled with rage, were subdued as they watched their daughter wrestle with her guilt. At school, word spread quickly of what had transpired. Lara, Bola, and Sei, though no longer plagued by nightmares, bore the weight of shame on their shoulders. They avoided Marah, unsure of how to face the girl they had wronged so deeply. For her part, Marah found herself in unfamiliar territory. The torment she had endured for so long had ended, but the scars remained. Forgiveness had lifted a burden from her heart, but she knew the road to healing was far from over. One Saturday afternoon, Prophet Elijah visited the Alade family again, this time with a specific purpose. "Marah," he began, his voice kind, "your journey is not over. There is one last thing you must do." Marah's brow furrowed. "What is it, sir?" The prophet smiled gently. "The river goddess has released her hold, and the connection between you and the water has broken. It is not a curse, but a gift. You must learn to use it wisely, to bring peace and also help others out of these painful scenarios." Marah's parents exchanged nervous glances. "What does that mean?" Kunli asked. "It means," Prophet Elijah replied, "that Marah must identify these symptoms she has seen in herself and bring others out of these circumstances." "You are free now," he said. "Go and live your life, knowing you are not bound by your past at school." The transformation was evident. Tayo, Lara, Bola, and Sei approached Marah one afternoon, their expressions a mixture of nervousness and hope. "We're sorry," Tayo said, her voice trembling, "for everything. We don't expect you to forgive us, but we needed to say it." Marah studied their faces, seeing the sincerity in their eyes. She smiled softly. "I forgave you already. Now it's time for all of us to move forward." From that day on, a new chapter began. Tayo and her friends worked hard to make amends, not just with Marah, but with the entire school. They joined efforts to create an anti-bullying campaign, using their story as a lesson in empathy and kindness. As for Marah, she found peace in embracing her true self. She continued to excel in her studies, but she no longer hid away. The shadows of the past faded, replaced by the light of understanding and reconciliation. Years later, as Marah stood at the bank of the sacred river once more, She smiled at the water's gentle ripples. She had come a long way from the lonely, tormented girl she had once been, but it was forgiveness that had truly set her free. And as the sun set over the horizon, Marah whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude for the pain that had shaped her, for the strength that had carried her, and for the peace that now filled her heart. Thanks for watching this story up to this point. I'm sure you've learned many things from this video. Let us hear from you at the comments section. And please don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.